Seems fair to me. Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and season's greetings to everybody. Thanks so much for joining us, and we sure appreciate you being with us on this edition of Donnybrook. Let's meet those who are assembled around the big table for the festive occasion, starting with the news director of KTRS, Wendy Wiese, Mr. Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, from KTRS Radio and the Riverfront Times, Ray Hartmann, and from the St. Louis American, 590 AM, 97.1 FM, and STLmag.com, looking quite festive for the occasion, Alvin Reid. And I hope you guys bring those nice Christmas stocking caps. Is that what you call them? Yeah. To the Schnucks in Richmond Heights tomorrow, because between 4 and 7, we'll be ringing the bells for the Salvation Army. Again, that's the Schnucks, Richmond Heights, between 4 and 7 p.m. Thanks so much.
On Clayton Road.
On Clayton Road, right.
East of Big Bend.
Yes, and when you get there, you'll decide, paper or plastic. Bill, I want to ask you about the impeachment vote by the Congress yesterday. The House voted to impeach President Donald J. Trump. We know that. But what are the ramifications? Ann Wagner was among the Republicans who voted not to impeach the president. In fact, no Republicans did. But will this haunt her in November if she's up against the likely Democratic foe, Jill Shoup, the state lawmaker?
No, I don't think so. I mean, this is Ann Wagner, the Republican. She's been all in for Trump for a long time now. And I don't think that there was any surprise that she was not in favor of impeachment. I mean, everybody knew that this was the way Ann Wagner would vote, so I don't think it's going to hurt her at all.
And go ahead. No, I was just going to say that the one thing that really would have hurt her, technically in her own district, was if she had been the lone, yay vote. Well, then she pretty much would have guaranteed, A, somebody would have ran against her in the primary, and B, she wouldn't have won the general election. So she was just stuck. So, no, I don't think it'll hurt her at all.
Well, I disagree, but I agree with you that she wasn't going to, it's not her specific vote that would have, she wasn't going to break ranks. And she notably didn't make a speech on the floor of the House, which Lacey did. But I think this does hurt a certain group of people. There's a lot of focus nationally on how it endangers 30 or so Democrats who are in districts that Trump won. I think it equally hurts Republicans like Ann Wagner in districts that, in her case, Claire McCaskill won in 2018. And I think not her vote specifically, but the fact that they voted against, that they're doing this Stonewall with a very sick man as president, I think is going to hurt.
Ray,
I think that's going to hurt.
Ann, as I look at Ann Wagner's record, there's a lot of problems I have with it. But the voters know Ann Wagner. I mean, she's not an unknown quantity. Everybody knew she was for Trump. The idea that this vote is going to somehow cost her, I just don't think so.
What I'm trying to figure out, do you think that it has to do with timing? Do you think it's the fact that it is the Christmas season? Because I honestly, when William Jefferson Clinton was impeached, I remember hearing it on the radio, listening intently, and this time of year, maybe
His was Clinton.
No, but I think that's
it. Was also December.
His was the same time.
No,
was this
Wendy's,
December?
Same time.
But Wendy's onto something because people are really not tuned into the impeachment.
I haven't heard outside of the radio
Right.
station. You never
It's
hear
a different
anybody.
situation.
I agree.
A different situation than, Bill Clinton's whole thing. Times have changed. We're here now. But I equate it to this. We all have, our favorite team, okay, in a sport or whatever. And we root for them. We want them to win. And if somebody came to you and told you, hey, there are going to be a lot of good plays, but I already know what the final score is going to be, you wouldn't watch the game. And I think that's what's going on here.
Exactly.
You mean because they know about what's going to happen in the Senate,
what's going to happen,
and they know the
and
foregone conclusion.
Right, and Mitch McConnell has already said what's going to happen.
Right.
And so it's kind of like we know what's going to happen.
I think that's true. And the funny thing is these impeachment hearings, according to pollsters, haven't changed people's views at all. And I like Wendy, I don't hear people in the real world talking about impeachment.
Okay, well, I disagree. I mean, and maybe
Really?
well, I don't disagree that a lot of people are tuning it out. I'm not arguing that. I am going to say this. I think it's pretty likely that the Senate isn't going to remove him. And
You think so? You think the Senate might not convict him?
I mean, Josh Hawley might
He's
change
an
his mind.
oracle.
No, what I'm trying to say is this, generally speaking, and the reason I think it's going to hurt Ann Wagner and people like her in purple districts is that the people that lose are generally more motivated and more angry and more forceful, and in this case, it's going to be the Democrats.
But don't forget,
That's
last
what I'm saying.
time the impeachment
And Jill Schupp's a
backfired.
really, the difference is Ann Wagner's up against a really solid
But what happened in
candidate.
'98?
Jill
Remember?
Schupp.
The Democrats were the ones who won, and it was the Republicans like Newt Gingrich who lost their jobs.
Well-
and they were the ones seeking impeachment.
The Republicans didn't win the presidential election in 2006.
Hey,
real
Ray,
quick,
okay, let's
just
move
real
on.
quick.
Real quick.
When Bill Clinton left office, every poll showed that he would have been reelected if he
Yes,
ran again.
right.
That
right.
isn't the case
It
here.
can backfire. Hey, Ray, I want to ask you about the state board, the Missouri Development Finance Board, which I think surprised a lot of people this week when it decided not to have a meeting on Tuesday. It was expected by many in the city that the board would approve some state tax credits, maybe $15 million this year and another $15 million next year for the individuals who are putting up a new MLS stadium in downtown St. Louis. It's a $450 million project that was going to be helped by $30 million in tax aid. Now, you wrote in your Front Times piece that the MLS owners do not need this money. Maybe they were listening to you, but what aside from reading your column, why do you think the state decided not to fork over $30 million for the MLS expansion franchise?
I don't think there's any other explanation. No, actually, I was a little surprised. I suspect my column didn't have a lot to do with it, but they did the right thing. I was actually shocked because I kind of thought this deal was cooked. It is absolutely the right decision. Substantively, I mean, it's not even debatable. Now, if the state,
Let's go home then. Let's go home.
I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear anything else. No, I mean, I think it's so obvious that there's a limited amount of economic development money. We all have our various problems with it, but the fact is, economic development money should be going to towns that lose their factories, or North City, or South City, or places that need it, not as a tip to guys that are doing. This is understand. This is two groups of billion.
But wasn't it Talby
They don't
Roach-
need it.
Was it Talby Roach who last week we were even talking about the fact that he was saying that the trolley, you know, that to default on the federal loans, to say that, look, we're not going to keep the promises that we made. I think this is right in line with that. If we say that, yes, you can count on us for X amount of dollars, then we can't just decide, well, I don't think I really want to do
political
that. Here's
winds blow,
six. Yeah,
right.
here's $6 million instead of $30 million.
Or was
No,
it because the governor is running for election and his predecessor actually ran on no welfare for billionaires, and there's the rumbling that Eric Greitens may or somebody else may get in the case and challenge Mike Parsons in a primary. So Mike Parsons is saying, I don't need this.
Mike Parsons is playing, obviously, as we said, he's playing to outstate.
Yeah.
He's doing
Sure.
the right thing.
I
My
agree.
point is,
it's a
he's not doing the right thing.
short-sighted thing
First
he's
of all,
doing.
that's right.
When you make a deal with somebody, like you say, you thought it was cooked. It was cooked. They made the deal. I mean, Parson was all in support of this, and it's a bad idea for the government to tell any entrepreneur, we support you financially, you go ahead, and then to say, well, I've decided for
Not so
political
much.
Now, can I point out,
Well,
too, that if you...
I'm not sure
if
they
you look-
made the deal. When did they make the
No.
deal?
They said he was all he's
When did
on
they make
record.
the deal?
No, he said we are all in on
Yeah,
supporting the soccer
yeah.
stadium. That was the
I
governor.
think-
You
there
just
was
said
like
a minute ago that
The
you
whole
thought
point
it
was
cooked.
There was a
Eric Greitens-
Parson-Kehoe alliance. The
Right.
lieutenant governor's
Right.
really into this.
But I mean-
and the governor read your column. That's the only explanation.
Okay, well, maybe then he got it right.
I think that
The result
and
is
like I
right.
say,
But
I fully support the plan and the ownership because, like, what are you talking about? 95% of it, I guess they're paying for.
Yes.
Okay, but this story kind of broke. All right, and here's Otis Wilson.
Williams.
Otis Wilson, Chicago Bear, 1985. And he's like, well, we're going to have to
Go to Plan B.
Go to Plan B or whatever. But then when the board made its statement, it was, they basically said that we had told the ownership group that this was coming down the line, and there was all this like, we're shocked. We had no idea this was coming, and it was kind of like, no, it's basically said they had already been told this. So I wish people would just be, like a week ago, somebody could have said like, hey, the state is not coming up with this money, so we're just going to pay it ourselves. But it's like we have to play out, everything's like a reality show. We have to play this out on stage.
First of all, I think the Taylors and Kavanaugh, they should build statues for them.
Phenomenal.
I think they are great citizens. I'm happy they're doing the MLS team. I think it's important for St. Louis. It's none of that. When they are able to build this without the $30 million, it's going to prove exactly the point that the Cardinals owners proved after they got turned down $250 million and said they couldn't compete without it. And then they won the World Series the next year, the first year, and were in it like 3 or 4 times. I mean, they're going to prove that this corporate welfare wasn't needed.
Let me recommend Ben Frederickson's column on this. He just wrote a column, and I thought it was very well done.
Very good. And I would say to Ben, how do you subsidize soccer when you're cutting 100,000 kids off of Medicaid?
Thank you.
That's my thought.
That is our state.
Wendy, I want to ask you about one lawmaker in St. Charles is upset with those, what I think are kind of funny and witty highway messages on those LED screens along the major highways, usually telling you about a traffic ahead, but now sometimes with witty little messages, you know, that, and I can't even think of one right now. They're so memorable. Nonetheless, this lawmaker says those signs on the side of the highways are a complete waste of time and money. What do you think?
Tony Levesco.
Tony Levesco.
O'Fallon. He is a Republican, and some of the little sayings include pretend that the highway is like a cat video, share it, or something like that. And, it might seem like it's kind of a Grinchy move this time of year, but if you think about it, you guys are talking about how we waste money. He's saying that these electronic message boards are hideously expensive, prohibitively expensive, and he would like for, the humor to be left to comedy TV and just keep the, just the brass tacks on the message boards, and I'm okay with that.
Do you think he might be offended that it makes some people smile?
Well, that might be. We don't want.
When you drive down the highway, you're supposed to be angry.
No, we don't. We don't want happy people.
Smile.
We don't want happy people.
Yeah,
we don't want happy people. I do think occasionally, because sometimes they are a little, like I'll be looking at the board and go, what? And I might end up in somebody's trunk as a result. I don't think it's necessary. Just tell me where the problem spots are.
Did I misunderstand? They do use them occasionally for like if there's traffic issues.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're not a
Amber
waste.
alerts
So the money is already spent. I mean, I can't imagine it costs more electricity to put, like when they don't, I guess they could put, instead of, we want to be humorless, they could say no traffic delay, ahead instead of, but I mean, they play a legitimate.
They don't run them night and day,
Well,
Ray. They selectively
but
decide.
I can't imagine it costs that much to run them.
Apparently
to
it
have
does.
one
On eBay.
message.
Apparently it
you could
does.
argue against the expense to have them, but once they're there, what's wrong, as Bill says, with having a fun little message? Why is that a bad thing?
Speaking of the state, Alvin Reid, what do you think of State Representative Chris Carter's idea to send control of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department back to the state? Until recently, the state did control the police. In fact, if you wanted promotion, let's say, to lieutenant, sometimes you had to contact your state senator, like Jet Banks. But now that changed under Mayor Slay. There's local control. But Carter says, look, we've got children dying and carjackings. Things are worse now under local control than they were when Jefferson City controlled the police. What do you think?
Well, I mean, seriously, that sounds crazy based upon where we were just like, 5, 6 years ago? But how about the state absorb some of these dozens of lawsuits that the St. Louis Police Department is under, and beating their own fellow man out there in the streets and shooting each other, and just, this police department is so out of control that it is something that need be at least considered.
Wow.
And I would have never said that 5, 6 years ago. But now it's just like, it's just ridiculous. And it's a police department that needs some kind of checks
Have
and
things
balances.
improved under Chief Hayden at all?
No, the number of lawsuits is increased under Chief Hayden, and we should have hired a chief from some other place. I said that when he got
Well,
hired.
I think what we need is a police board. And I have to admit, I was all for local control. And of all the things in all these years that I was like, feel stupid about, it's like I just assumed that when we went from a police board in Jefferson City of 5 people who they said it was like to keep out of politics, like the governor wasn't a political person in either party. Of course it was political. And I thought, well, it doesn't make sense to have the governor appoint a police board, have it come to St. Louis. And I just assumed that meant the mayor would appoint a police board, the alderman would approve them. And sure enough, it's just a department of city government,
And
which
yet,
is crazy.
But hang on a second, though, Ray.
but
the guy in charge is eminently qualified and respected nationwide. I'm
Right.
talking about the public safety director of Judge Jimmy Edwards.
I
You couldn't get a police board that would be a better thinker operator than this fella, in my
disagree
opinion.
with Mr. Reid about letting Jeff say this. To me is a return to the better together. I'm not saying you're, but I don't like
Jeff
the idea
City?
of Jeff City.
You want Jeff City?
I don't want Jeff
Of
City.
all the
I
rural
don't want Jeff
outstate
City telling us
Missouri?
anything.
No, what I'm
To run
saying
our
is
police
like,
board?
But I do
and
think
for
we need a
that,
police
I'm just
board.
saying,
And
wait,
there's no disrespect to
this
Jimmy. I
This
just
need
think we
be
need a police
considered.
board.
I would have never, ever approved this special appointed board to run the city school district. At the same time, it seems to have worked out a little better than where we were at that time. I don't, once again, not for infinity, and I'm not saying it even should be done. What I am saying is, listen, if you perform this poorly, something has to change.
I don't think that. I just don't think that if the Archangel Gabriel came down at this moment, you could impact the crime stats
think
in
that's
this
fair.
city.
No, but I'm not talking about the crime.
I think that this is beyond structure. This is beyond process. This
Yeah.
is beyond geography.
No, I hear you.
This
I
is
think
societal.
This is what I'm saying is it's the conduct of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department that need be addressed. Then the violence, okay, fine. But this, I'm talking about the police department.
Okay.
Right.
Now, Alvin, it is being addressed because let's take a look at the unfortunate, tragic case of the Russian roulette.
Yeah.
That officer's been arrested. Then you have arrests and convictions of those officers who are beating their fellow officer, right? And
Well, those cases, they're pending.
are they pending?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
but that's in the system.
Well, 2 have
people
pled
pleaded
guilty.
guilty,
Right.
And 2 pleaded guilty. And then you have the horrific viral Facebook messages. And those guys have been fired. So we've had some bad apples, bad hombres on the police department, but the system seems to be kicking them out. I agree, we can't get enough police officers in the city. And maybe there are, is there anything wrong with possibly getting a police chief once in a while who's not from St. Louis?
That's what I'm saying.
But wait a minute. I agree, first of all, Wendy. Let's not blame all the problems on the police department. I mean, and there are systemic problems we have with crime that cannot be laid at the doorstep of the police department.
Right.
And I understand the abuses, but I'm talking about that. And the reason I say a police board, it's not going to be an overnight fix either, but we need to have more of a sense. We, first of all, don't want to lose control locally of the police department, but there's got to be a sense that the community has more control or input or something than we have right now.
I mean, but Ray, I just get.
I don't disagree with you.
I'm sorry, I just get tired of hearing that the community wants this. The community wants everybody quit getting shot. That's what the community
I
wants.
agree.
And maybe, like I say, Chris Carter, Jamil Nasheed, those are elected officials. Those are African American elected officials saying, like, I'm fed up with it.
Yeah, Jamil Nasheed is in favor of that.
So
right, yeah.
how about? I'm not saying do it, but I'd say, like, how about we listen to what they have to say?
All right, who's next? Bill. This week, the Supreme Court of the United States refused to look at a decision by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is out west, that told the city of Boise that it could not arrest the homeless for sleeping on sidewalks or in city parks. Now, if that's the rule of the land now in the United States, that the police cannot shoo people out of parks, cannot tell them to keep moving if they're sleeping on sidewalks, does that have ramifications for St. Louis where, let's say, the homeless are gathering in tents in the park across the street from KMOX or the Post-Dispatch? The police, if that's public property, the police can't tell them to leave?
Well, apparently, I mean, I haven't seen a decision or anything, Charlie, but I mean, I don't even know what to say. I mean, like, I think that the city ought to have be building barracks down by the river that we can just cart people to so they can get in out of the weather if we have to. But if somebody wants to sleep in the park, I'm not sure that the police ought to be able to roust them. I really don't know.
I agree, and especially during this particular season, you know, I don't think the message of the Prince of Peace was, you know, we arrest people who are on bad time or who have fallen on bad times or hard times, and who have to sleep on a park bench or on a you know a little piece of grass or on the sidewalk. I'm very uncomfortable with arresting people. I understand the optics, and I understand
It's not
about
just
the
optics.
business community.
California has a terrible problem.
It does.
I know they do.
Oakland,
I know they do.
California one city has 60 encampments, which means groups of tents throughout the city on public property. And, you know, people are not using restrooms, they're using sidewalks, they're leaving needles around, and, you know, they're doing things that make the neighborhood less pleasant than it was before.
Well, I agree with Bill and Wendy that you can't be arresting the people, and maybe if that continues, there will be some political will to address long-term problems. And I have an idea where you could find $30 million. $30 million to build housing.
Yeah, but Ray,
imagine that.
What if they're on a playground?
Can you imagine how much housing you could do with $30 million?
Oh, okay. Apples and oranges.
What about?
Right.
We're trying to make the
Maybe if
city
we put little
better
soccer
and more
balls on there,
livable
that would work.
And grow the city in soccer. Young people
But they're going
like
to do
soccer.
it anyway because it's a
No,
good
forget that, Ray.
investment
We
for them.
moved on.
Okay.
But here's a
Even
real
though that's
example.
undebatable.
Downtown
It is
St. Louis,
undebatable.
as you
I'm
know,
sorry.
near some of those new condos, there was a park that's I think on Lucas, between like 13th and 15th, and the homeless were hanging out there and sleeping there, and the kids couldn't play on the swing set or the slides. I mean, what do? You can't arrest them. So the homeless have the slides, Ray?
Well,
Well, I thought. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I was
no.
going to say the homeless were there first, and on what you're talking about, Lucas Park behind the library. You know, it was like the Homo sapiens and the Neanderthals. The homeless people were there first because it was right next to Larry Rice.
Right.
And all of a sudden, these people came in,
Condos.
bought the condos,
Lots.
and realized their values would go way up if they could get rid of the Neanderthals.
Children.
By the way,
you can't be in a park after 10 o'clock throughout, and I don't know how the police handle
You mean?
that.
I think you mean daycare centers.
Oh, good point. Good point.
point.
But just
I'm not saying that they-
the whole idea where you got to move on. All right, and I know it's a game where they go right back and you play this game or whatever. But at the same time, you don't have to necessarily arrest people. At the same time, you don't have to necessarily let them sleep in the park.
Well, but
I'm not here to even argue about systemic and what are we going to do and society is a wreck and all that. I'm just saying, like, how do you handle the problem? And I don't think you should arrest people for sleeping in a park, but that doesn't mean you let them sleep
Well,
in
but
the park.
the court decision, which I didn't read either. Usually, Bill's read these by now. But
Come on. Never read one in my life.
Except my own, right?
I
But
gave you the
wasn't the
summary.
court decision that you couldn't arrest him unless you had other provisions for
Yes,
them?
if you had a
That
place,
was
if there
the
was no
key
place
point.
for them to go,
And
then they
so
couldn't be
my point
arrested.
is, I'm not advocating that we have people laying
right.
on the streets. And so we need to do what they
Okay.
said, which is to provide a place
Now-
for them with that
Okay.
$30 million.
Alvin Reid, the County of St. Charles, is thinking about eliminating the vehicle emissions tests, which we all take part in the greater St. Louis area, at least in the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County and heretofore some of the other counties, before we get our license plates renewed. We have to go to a dealer or some sort of mechanic, and then he or she measures the exhaust coming out of the tailpipe. And if it's too high, guess what? You got to get it fixed. Well, now they're talking about waiving that test. I think that's a terrible thing. What do you think?
I agree. I think there are some vehicles, especially everyone that was built before 2014. I have two 2014s.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But no, make a date that if it was built before this date, that you do have to still get an emissions test, and the state should be in control of this, because there are some cars out there that you get behind them and you have to put like your in where the air just circulates within, or else you'll die. Okay, that needs to be monitored, but just eliminating it is not a good.
No, and unilaterally, I'm that really makes me uncomfortable because St. Louis County has decided we're not going to enforce driving while intoxicated laws. This is a public health issue, and you cannot just say, we don't want to abide by that. That's wrong.
We're all connected somehow. I wrote this week, not to get changed up, but about the Maryland Heights putting in a huge development,
The
which
floodplain.
in its best case will send flooding to other places. That's the best case. It's the same principle. This is all our air. You don't get to say, well, though in St. Charles County, we
agree.
reserve the right to pollute our air, because that doesn't affect the rest of you. That's the interconnected nature of us all is what has to be considered.
The only quibble I have with Alvin is I have a 2013.
Oh,
Yeah, we wanna
and I don't think there should be a limit. Like I think everybody should be tested.
I think
if we're
so.
going to have a limit, we'll make
If
it
you have a brand
13.
new car, I don't think you should have to go down there 2 years later and pay money to have your emissions
Oh, well,
checked.
why not?
Why not?
It keeps some people working, and
Yeah, why not?
And it's just cars can be lemons, Alvin. You can have a new car, and a year and a half later something
right.
go wrong.
All right,
That's
okay.
right.
All right, I'll take my Tesla down there.
Well,
I don't have a Tesla, people.
Thank you so much. I hope people contribute to the 9 Network so that we can buy newer automobiles. Let's see what the viewers had to say about last week's program. We heard from Frank Medica of Maryville, Illinois, who said, please discuss what Kansas City is doing with their public transportation compared to St. Louis. That's right, Frank. Free public transportation now. If an expired Missouri temporary license tag is attached to each trolley car, they'll run forever. That from John L. Johnson of St. Louis County. You can write us care of KETC, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. We love those emails, letters at ketc.org, and those tweets, hashtag Donnybrook STL. And we hope you enjoy us on your favorite podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and TuneIn. And we encourage everybody to join us tomorrow between 4 and 7 when we ring the bells for the Salvation Army at the Schnucks in Richmond Heights on Clayton Road. Thank you in advance for your generosity, and thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and Happy Holidays.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.